Kim mentioned rapport as she was ending that last section, because I realized that I neglected to share something when I was speaking about rapport. You'll notice that I primarily focused on establishing a relationship as a child life specialist with the teen, and then ended with the medical professionals you might be working with. In the course of preparing for this presentation, Kim and I realized that there was just so much information that we wanted to share with you that we really did not have time to go into helping the parents establish rapport with teens to the depth that we wanted to, and felt that creating a handout that you could actually utilize to share with parents might be most useful. So at the end of this presentation, one of the giveaways that we will have for you is that handout that we prepared for you. So now I will move on to focusing on adolescence with a parent who is in the final phases of life or dying. The list of emotions that you see before you is no way inclusive. It may reflect some distinctions and differences from younger children. I think it's particularly beneficial to look at it as you do think in terms of the development of the teenage brain, both male and female, helping to educate parents that teenage grief may look more like anxiety or frustration, helping them recognize how isolated and different a teen who has a parent with a serious illness may feel from their peers, while at the same time trying to pretend that everything is normal, particularly when they may be sensing some guilt related to the death of their parent, which we'll discuss a little bit more in just a few minutes. And certainly that pressure that they may be putting on themselves to feel strong, competent, capable. At the same time, recognizing how important it is sometimes to socialize with teens, or I would say potentially be participating in sports as an outlet, allowing the teen, when necessary or desired, to have that permission to step away from the family, to engage in the normal activities that they would be doing without the medical situation or death occurring. All of these things are important, and modeling with parents and child life specialists how to express emotions in a healthy way may be particularly necessary for the teen. And finally, seeing adults who are able to express their grief in healthy ways can also be very beneficial to teens. In the time that we have left, I want to share with you two perspectives of grief that has helped shape my work with teens. The first is Dr. Ken Doka. He has created the spectrum of mourning and identified intuitive mourners and instrumental mourners, being on the two ends of the continuum. A lot of the work comes from Men Don't Cry, Women Do, which is included in the references at the end of this presentation. Much of Dr. Doka's work is to inform Western counselors of the spectrum of grief he believes exists, and the tendency for individuals to be somewhere on the spectrum between what he terms intuitive mourners and the instrumental mourners. He believes there are many different ways individuals can experience, express, and adapt to grief. There are affective strategies, but also more activity or cognition strategies that can be of equal benefit. What Dr. Doka emphasizes is the misfit that can occur when an individual is forced into a way of grieving that does not fit with his temperament or style or preferred way to handle emotions, as in the case of grief. He goes on to say that our Western culture often mistakenly feels that if the person is not talking about his feelings, he is not processing them well. I'm hopeful that as you reflect on the information that's been presented on the distinctions between male and female brains, this may make even more sense to you and guide some of your interactions around a teen who may be grieving. In front of you are intuitive mourners. Um, Again, remember that many people, of course, fit somewhere on a spectrum, not necessarily exclusively at one end or the other of the spectrum. But for intuitive mourners, grief is experienced more emotionally. There are incredible waves of feelings. The external manifestation often looks like the need to express in words and explore their feelings deeply. The feelings may appear overwhelming, or they may they may be feeling devastated, and that regularly processing these feelings by talking with others, seeking support within a group or a close friend is more important, more needed for these intuitive mourners. I think, again, as you reflect, you can understand that often, not always, intuitive mourners do tend to be more female. For intuitive mourners, many of the activities that Kim identified fit very well. But just to highlight a few, making a memory string where a bead is selected for a particular memory, experience, maybe a favorite food of a parent. And that bead, the color, the shape, reflects that one distinct memory. And then they create a bracelet or a necklace of each of those beads, memories, which they can then carry with them and share with friends, other family members. I think it's easy to see how some of the journaling, collaging that Kim talked about earlier would fit very well with intuitive mourners, as well as making a graffiti wall. Here is an example of a grief collage that was created by one of our teens. What is important to remember as a child life specialist is that teens on this side of the spectrum tend to become more overwhelmed with their feelings around the loss. And it may be more difficult for them to be able to create a plan for when those feelings become overwhelming. As an example, an 8th grader who was signing up for dance, her mother passed away before she went to the tryouts. She saw her mother's name on the list and immediately became overwhelmed with grief and sorrow. Having a plan in circumstances like that for that kind of intuitive mourner is important to help create so that they're a little bit more prepared should that happen. On the other end of the spectrum are more instrumental mourners. Grief is experienced physically. There tends to be a more active response to the grief. The focus is definitely on cognition, less on affect. They may speak of grief in an intellectual way. For me, having teens that are more on this side of the spectrum, I often, again, especially refer back to that educational component that can be so beneficial for teens, and will speak in detail about Dr. Doka's work and help them understand where the concepts and where they might be on the spectrum. And that they seem to really gravitate towards understanding these concepts, being able to identify where they might be. And I think it helps them feel empowered to be able to understand what kinds of activities, in fact, could be of more benefit to them. And I would go on and say that in working in a family setting, helping teens understand the uniqueness of where they may be and the distinctions with other family members can be especially important for that understanding and family solidarity around how each person in the family may be experiencing their grief in different ways. Again, the external manifestations may look more cognitive, goal-oriented. The doing, building activities, which I want to just highlight for you, are particularly beneficial. You can see that planning an event such as a memorial run, a race to raise funds for a particular kind of cancer can really appeal to an instrumental mourner. planting a tree, building something. I'm reminded again at one of the times that I heard Dr. Doka speak, he was talking about a young man whose brother died with a wife expecting their first child. The brother had been in the midst of building a home for them. And every weekend when he was off work, he went to that home to finish completing it. And it was through the pounding of the nails, the processing of getting the lights in place, all that, that he was able to sort of physically express and work through his grief, which again is in contrast to a more affective mourner who would want to talk more about their feelings. Aha, here we are. So I had a little problem moving the PowerPoint forward. The other concept that I wanted to share with you related to grief that I have found particularly beneficial is in the last few years, I have heard Julie Caplow and Christopher Lane speak a few times on their theory of grief that focuses on teens. I want to briefly highlight some of the implications they suggest for supporting grieving teens. They have identified a multidimensional grief theory that incorporates the three areas above. Separation distress refers to the deceased person no longer physically being present to the teen. An example of a separation distress that a teen might feel is that it won't be any fun to go to the baseball game anymore. That was something that Dad and I always did together. I can't imagine using these tickets again. Existential or identity distress just refers to the way the person interacted or identified with the teen. An example of this would be, why should I fill out these college applications? It was Dad that always encouraged me, that saw me as the college graduate. Finally, circumstance-related distress refers to the way that the person died. An example of this could possibly be a mom who commits suicide and a teen feeling that if my friends knew the way my mom really died, they wouldn't want to be a friend of mine anymore. Embarrassed around what happened. In 2017, a workbook was published and is referenced here for the further study of how to interact with teens who are grieving based upon this work. While I recognize that most of you will be working with teens who have parents seriously ill or near death, potentially not working with teens who have had a parent already die, I wanted to share this emerging information. I wonder if being aware of these three tenets of grief under their theory can help form our interactions prior to death with teens. Moving on just briefly to legacy building, it is wonderful to help parents leave lasting connections and ideally to have that teen also respond by leaving meaningful interactions with the parent. Written notes are amazing. Honestly, I have found them incredibly emotional for a parent to do. It's hard to get them to do them. Although what I have found to be a little bit more beneficial, as what Kim mentioned in the other activities, is creating sort of that interview style where you're going back and forth and including both parents, the ill parent and if the caregiver parent is also in the home, asking an interview question like, tell me about the day I was born, and getting both parents to reflect what their memories around that were, and building on those kinds of activities. What was my first birthday like? What do you remember? What about the first day I went to school? Creating that kind of dialogue has been a little bit more successful for me. Another wonderful activity is time capsules. Again, perhaps a parent can leave some either messages or notes for significant days or events in a child's life, such as when they get their driver's license, when they graduate from high school. Sometimes it can be symbols, leaving charms, both reflecting back of particular things that were meaningful that the parent and child shared together, a shell for the first time they went to the beach, or that was just a special place for them, can also be included in time capsules. And then as we've talked about, creating the memory books or scrapbooking, creating parents' favorite music, all of these are ways that you can move forward creating some of those lasting connections between the parent and the teen. If you find that these don't occur, one option to suggest to parents or friends, family members, is at the funeral to create a note card with that person's name and ask those who are in attendance to write a special memory that can then be put together in a scrapbook for the teen. Lastly, Kim and I, in this conversation, before we conclude, feel that it is important to include information for you if you become aware that the teen you are working with is potentially considering self-harm or suicide. If you're working with a teen of an adult patient, the same resources for when it's the teen as the patient may not be in place for you. You may not be able to have a consult with psychiatry as you would with the teen, since the teen is not the medical patient. Or the parent may be relaying this concern, or you're working with a teen in a community. For all the reasons, please take note of every potential outcry for help seriously. As we discussed in the beginning of your therapeutic relationship with the teen, be sure to explain your limits of confidentiality. If you believe it is necessary, determine a plan with the teen and the parent for safety and support. We've included resources for your reference. Make sure that you know the ethical guidelines for your profession and the laws of your state. And make sure that within your professional setting there is protocol that you understand and follow. Finally, as we move into our questions section, I wanted to share with you a picture of our executive director, Alex Gabby, with his 3 children. This is 7 years after his wife was diagnosed with cancer at the birth of their final son, Luca. Keep in mind that the support you offer to children and teens during their parents' illness and potentially at the final phases of their life can make such an incredible difference. We're delighted that we've been able to share this information with you today and are looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.